good to see so many people here in this talk. Hello, everyone. Against. As you know, that Andreas is the former chief scientist at Amazon, and is now with Stanford University, UC Berkeley, and also Shandong Business School in China, Graduate School of Business in China. Andreas is a big shot in the field of data science, big data, social mobile technologies, and also consumer behavior. And he particularly loves to study people and the data they create. And he often gives keynotes at top conferences, and also at the corporate events in the world. And he provides consulting service to many big companies. So it's really a great honor to have him here to share his vision in data refineries for data people recreate, the data people own, and also who use it, etc. Actually, he will answer all the questions. So to do something in return, please do have more interaction with him during the talk, and also show your passions in learning, and most importantly, enjoy it. So let's welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you. What an honor to be here at NTUEE and talk to the brightest minds of Taiwan. Thank you for coming here. And thank you, Dean Liao, for your first day back in Taiwan after you were in the US, taking the precious time out of your day here and making sure that we have a wonderful 2 hours. And I want to tell you what my goal is in those 2 hours. In the first half, I will give you a talk where I will share with you some of the things about big data, about social data, about transparency. And in English, I give this talk the title, Your Data. Or maybe, is it our data? That's why we have this little play. And as a subtitle for it, I have data of the people, by the people, and for the people. Does anybody know where that expression comes from? Abraham Lincoln said that when he founded the United States. And the translation here is, I think, a pretty good one we came up with on Saturday evening when we prepared. And it turned out that Dr. Sun Yat-sen, who founded Taiwan, that he came up with the same idea. He didn't really talk about data, but that notion that it's about people, that is created by people, but ultimately it is for the people. That is something which is very close to my heart. There are 3 things I want you to learn. The first one is transparency. Not a one-way mirror where the company can see you, where the university can see you, but a 2-way window where you also can see the other side. That transparency is how we should look at big data. The second one I want to talk about is that identity, who you are, is one of the key questions. Are you the data you create? Are you what it says in your passport? Maybe are you the connections you have? Are you the searches you do? Are you the places you have been to, the GPS? Are you the Facebook account you have? So who are you? So identity. So we have transparency, we have identity. And the third one I want to talk about then is that about ownership. So When I was in Professor Liao's office, I had a cup of tea. The little bit of saliva I left on that tea, she probably already has somebody analyzed for my DNA to figure out, what will be the diseases I'll have when I get old. What are the risks I have? The little bit of saliva we leave on the water bottle we drink is enough to figure out those things about us. Okay, so I'll talk for an hour, and then I want to have you figure out some data which you personally, each of you, would not be comfortable if the rest of the room knew about it. But I don't want you to specifically say, oh, I don't want them to know that I stayed over at that girl's place or something. No, just the category of the data. And then in the break, we take a 15-minute break. We give you the chance to think about questions. And then in the second half, the three of us will sit on stage, have a conversation, and try to incorporate the questions you have. Because I genuinely believe that the topic of our data, topic of transparency, is not something where you just need to sit down and take notes, but it's much more something where you need to engage, where you need to think, where you need to figure out what does it mean to you. So as you know, I come from Silicon Valley, and there the question always is, how can you change the world? And if you think about innovation from the last 20 years, when you were just born, I think almost all innovation is related to data. So that's why I'm super passionate about data. So maybe a bit about my background. I'm from Germany. I did my undergraduate degree in physics at CERN in Geneva, at the big accelerator. And what we did there is we measure the interactions that particles have with each other. So we managed to understand the properties of particles in physics by seeing how do they interact with each other. That was the last century. In this century, we managed to measure the interactions between people. How do people interact with each other? For example, on Facebook. When you post something, who immediately likes it? Because they always want to know what is the latest things you're posting. So what the last century brought to us, namely understanding physics and amazing physical progress in sciences, this century, I think, we'll see the same progress in the social sciences based on the interactions that we now can observe between people. I was just yesterday thinking that 100 years ago, if you went to hospital, they wouldn't even have the ability to run X-rays on you. That's an example where decisions are based, what do they do with you? Now, by seeing things, by making things transparent, by understanding whether your bone is broken or not, or whether you need to have a certain treatment, by seeing things that people couldn't see before. It's all about data. All right. So my talk, which is the first part, will be 3 parts. In the first part, I'll talk about the traces we leave and give you lots of examples. I then talk about sensors. After all, this is EE here. It's about communication, and all sensors are connected these days. So everything we measure is connected to the internet. Some people call it Internet of Things. And the last part of the first part, I talk about the graph, the social graph. Then I just give lots of examples, and then I close with some questions about secrets. All right, so let's look at the traces we leave. So take geolocation as an example. Look at the many sources that, let's say in the simplest case, Google has to find out where you go. So of course, it knows which access point you have, where your MAC address of your phone is connecting to. The base stations know where your phone is and how it is moving, and you want them to know, because if they don't know, then your phone won't be ringing. So that notion that you can't want one, oh, I want to be anonymous, but you want another thing, I want my phone to ring when somebody wants to reach me. You can't have both. So you know the handover between base stations. What other traces do we leave besides what our mobile phone has? Well, there's a camera right there. It probably has good enough face recognition to know who is in the room. I last year gave a talk in London. I just flew in from the United States, slept in a hotel, I gave my talk, I went back the next day, back to Gatwick, and before I could even check in, a plainclothes gentleman approaches me and says, "Excuse me, what's your name?" I said, "I'm not telling you." "Is it Andreas Weigend?" Like, wow. Not bad, not bad. "I would like to have a conversation with you." So he had a conversation with me because I always go into Europe with my European passport, which actually says Sebastian Weigend, my middle name. And I always leave with my American passport where it says Andreas Weigend. So they thought, that is suspicious. That guy comes in for one day, his ticket in has a different name when his ticket out. We need to have a conversation. And they picked me out before I checked in. So I just entered Gatwick, and the guy came up to me. One hypothesis I have is that most value of data gets created in ways the data wasn't intended for. Double E example. In the US, you want to know about electricity because the electricity companies are publicly traded, and by knowing how they are doing, you can place bets on the stock markets for or against them. Now, nobody can stop you to put little inductive loops close to the big power lines, and from there, measure how much current is flowing through that. I like those things where you can't do anything about it. You can't Faraday off all the power lines. Or here's another example, again with power. I was at another conference and I logged into it's called O-Power. It is something that measures your electricity at home. We have smart meters in the United States, and the time resolution is that of about 15 minutes. And I logged in, and I lived by myself, but there was a clear spike in power for an hour. Did somebody break into my house? What would that be? About 1,000 watts for about an hour. I think, that is my washing machine. So a friend of mine who has a key, he said, Andreas is not here. And I publish all my whereabouts on Weigend.com, on my website. You even know which seat I'll be sitting on Wednesday at Eva Airlines when I fly from here to Shanghai. I share all my seat information, all my flight information. So he knew Andreas is safely far away, so I can do my laundry at his place without him noticing. But he left his traces because of the energy consumption. Now that is if you have resolution 15 minutes. Let's now bring that resolution down to seconds. There's a company in London that knows the signatures, the phase angles between current and voltage of the different appliances you have. So they know whether it's the microwave you switched on or whether it is maybe, your kettle. So they know what devices you have on at what time of the day. and you can't do anything about it because you need to have the energy to power your microwave. I want to give you another couple of examples of these traces. Another trace is that of license plates. So every car has a number plate. Every car has a license plate. The purpose of the license plate clearly is to identify the car. It's not a funny secondary business. No, you have a license plate so people know, this is your car. So there's a company, again in the US, that has little innocent cameras taking pictures of license plates. And by now, image processing is so good, if you have a good Bayesian model, you can pretty well know what is on the license plate, even when the car is moving. Now, if you want to help them out, and if you want to put a little dash cam on your license, on your own dash on your car, so as you are driving around and it figures out what are the license plates of the other cars in the neighborhood, they even pay you for that. Or if you live at a busy street, you can put a camera in your window, and as cars are going by, it is measuring, it's observing, it's recording and doing image processing of what these license plates are. So there is clearly nothing funny about that. Because you could even have a person who sits down there and manually writes down the license plates of the cars going by. But what I want to make clear to you is that there is this switch, this phase transition, which we live in right now, where something, just by being able to aggregate it, now in the big picture, suddenly becomes very different in quality. You can pay that company that records those license plates, and let's say you have a partner, and maybe she has a car, and you know the number plate of the car of your girlfriend. So you can say, tell me where that car has been. And your girlfriend, she told you, she has to work so hard at wherever she's working, but her car left work at 5 p.m. and visited somewhere else, and that 3 times a week. So maybe she has another boyfriend. So these are traces we leave. Traces of our cars, traces of our mobile phone, traces of our electricity consumption. The world we live in now, in this connected world, is that we can put together all these traces. And the punchline here, I think, is that you have no privacy. You can live the illusion of privacy, but it is just an illusion. So what can you do here as EEs, computer science, as data people? What can you do with all those data? That's the example of basically data, the traces we leave. I have many more, and I'm happy to talk to you more if you have more questions about that. But you get the idea that to live means to create data. The searches you do. I checked on Google, and I had, I think, 10,000 searches were stored there about me. I think I would die if somebody showed all these searches behind me. It's amazing how much we trust to Google, to Yahoo, in the searches we do. The second point of the first part is that I want to talk about sensors. A friend of mine has a company in Palo Alto, and I'm advisor to the company. It's called Bay Sensors. And if you walk through Palo Alto, in many stores you see it looks like a spider, but it's not a spider. It is a camera. It is a camera they rip out of the phone and paste to the phone, to the window of the store, outward facing. So as you're walking on the street, the camera picks you up. Now, it just knows, maybe roughly how old you are, maybe whether you're walking fast or slow. And in the first stage, it allows the store owner to run experiments. For example, there's a coffee shop, and they're trying to figure out what is the best message we should have. Should we say, buy two, get one free? Or should we say, 30% off? Both are reasonable things. In the online world, at Amazon, that was day one to do so-called A/B tests, where you have one idea, a hypothesis, and you have another idea, another hypothesis, and you show half of the people who come randomly selected the first idea, and the other half you show the second idea, and then you measure in the equation of business you write down, or in the fitness function, you measure which of the two helps you more. And at Amazon, this fitness function is viewed from the perspective of the customer, which of them delights the customer more. That was day one online. You knew online that you can't not tell Amazon what you want to buy. But people in the offline world are very suspicious about this, because they feel that these cameras, they are measuring things which might be, things they don't want to reveal. Before I go back to Palo Alto to tell that story, I just heard another story about a comedy club in Spain. Now, that comedy club wasn't doing all that well. So they didn't sell the tickets they wanted to sell. So they were thinking, we should change our pricing model. They don't charge anymore by you buying a ticket for the event. They charge every time you laugh. So each seat has a camera and a microphone, and every time you laugh, you have to pay a quarter. Professor Liao, do you think we should also implement that in class? Every time the students laugh, we get paid? That's interesting, how that changes behavior. How paying by laugh. The comedy club is doing well now, because people say, a quarter by laugh, that's worth it. And there's a feedback loop to the performers, that they now know exactly which jokes work. And they even know which jokes work in which part of the room. They know which jokes works with guys, which jokes work with girls. So you can now have much better way of developing your product, in this case, the comedy show. So back to the place in Palo Alto. They measure these cameras, the company is called base sensors, they measure where a person is walking, and they also sniff your phone and your MAC address. So over time, they're pretty good in knowing who you are, where you go. So they can give the store owner information about where you live, for instance. So there are three reasons, or three sources for data that's of interest to the store owner. One, it is data of things you have bought in the past. Two, it is the situation you're in. Are you early today, so you're ready actually to maybe have a cup of coffee before you go to school? And the third one is that of the social graph. And the social graph is about the connections between people. Over time, they came up with different deals with the different shops. So for example, they have a deal with a shop where you can buy shoes. And here's the deal. It's on University Avenue in Palo Alto. So when you enter another shop where they sell shoes, the first shop they have the deal with sends you a text message saying, hey, we think you might be interested in shoes. If you come to our shop and buy within the next 5 minutes, we give you 90% discount. If you come within 6 minutes, 80% discount. 7 minutes, 70%, and so on and so forth. So guess what? You grab your phone and you're out of that first shop and go to the shop where you get the discount. Now what happens? When you arrive at that shop, you get a message from the other shop saying, hey, we think you want to buy a pair of shoes. We give you, so people are crossing like wild. So one more story about the crossing. In class last quarter, we had a friend of mine called Max Levchin come to class. Max was a co-founder of PayPal, and he now runs a company called Affirm. Affirm computes under which conditions we should give you credit. So let's say you want to buy that beautiful bicycle, but you don't have enough money. So you need to share data with Affirm, and they figure out how much of a premium you need to pay. And being at NTUEE, we're not worried. You all have good jobs. You get it very easily. But there are some risks which in the past we thought were outside the model. For example, the risk of getting run over by a bus. The proverbial risk, people always said, but what if you get run over by a bus? Now, you have to share your geolocation, how you move around with Affirm. They now know that if you live in the dorm on campus and all you're doing every day is just take the stairs down, walk across the street, go to the lecture, walk across the street, go back home, there's almost no risk for you to getting hit by a bus. On the other hand, if you live with your parents and a long way and you have to walk for quite a bit on very busy streets, they know what time of the day you're walking, and they know from past data what the chances are that there are accidents. So should they be pricing that? Should they be saying, because you live in a dorm and you have a very short way, versus you have all the way to Taipei every day, your chance of having an accident are much higher. So you have to have worse conditions for your credit. Should that be priced in? So assume you had all the data in the world, readily available at your fingertips. What would you do in terms of giving people credit? Or let's bring it closer to the classroom. Assume I knew everything about your situation right now. I know that typically about half an hour into a talk, half of the students have fallen asleep, and the other half is having sexual fantasies. But those who are still with me here, so if you had the data, if I knew how excited you are from the way you're sitting on your chairs, are you leaning forward or are you about to doze off? If I knew from your blood pressure or from your skin galvanization what excites you, if I knew who is tracking well, who is almost getting bored right now, and who is just trying hard to understand the guy with the German accent, what is he talking about? There's a new university which started teaching this quarter. It's called Minerva University. It is just 30 students they have in the first year. And how it works is that each student has all these signals taken when they're learning, and then the professor just sees who is doing well, who is right now not sure about it. Then they can do quick polls. Who think it's too fast, who think it's too slow, who thinks that A is the case, who thinks A is not the case. And then they connect these people to have a discussion with each other. It's called Minerva University, and it's really based on trying to measure things about the students in the classroom in order to help them learn more. Very different model from having somebody come and just lecture to you. I often tell my students that undergraduates learn to answer questions. Graduate students learn to ask questions. So I think asking good questions is much more important for the world we live in, because you can easily find the answers. You know, you Google them and you have the answer. But what are the good questions to work on? What are the good questions to ask? The last ingredient, besides the traces we leave, some cases knowingly, willingly, in other cases not knowingly, not so willingly, and the sensors, like the ones in Palo Alto, or maybe even here at NTU, the third source is that of the social graph. Many people think about many things when they hear the word graph. I don't mean a graph like a histogram or like a distribution, something like that. When I use the term social graph, I mean a network. When I say network, I don't mean the way maybe some of you think about network, like communication network, worrying about how to make mobile phones work. I mean the network between people. So in my view, there's one social graph in the world. And the different networks observe different properties of that graph. So for example, Facebook. Facebook projects out certain elements of the graph. Or LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a different perspective onto the same graph. Google. Google measures the graph. Google knows who you're sending messages to, who you're receiving messages from. And as in many cases, doing things on the network level, for example, spam detection, is quite easy on the network level, but super hard if you try to do it on the message, on the individual message level. So for me, there's one social graph, and there are different ways of refining it for the purpose you have. I want to use some LinkedIn examples for the social graph. And I am very interested in what I call sign flips, where you used to believe that something is positive, and because of some changes, now what you thought was a positive thing becomes a negative thing. So, you know, as a physicist, we say what matters is whether a graph is like this, whether the graph goes like that, whether it's like this, or whether it's like that. All the rest you can take logarithms, you can, do all kinds of transformations on, but the key thing is, is it positive, is it negative? Here's an example of a sign flip. Who of you knows what a Rolodex is? Rolodex. It's something old people used to have, where they have business cards and they put them on something and they can roll it, and that was called a Rolodex. So basically, it is your contact list. It is the people, whose numbers you have, the people you're connected with, the people you can reach. It is your local neighborhood of the social graph. In the past, people got, quote, hired for their Rolodex. This means that let's say you'll be a salesperson somewhere and you have those contacts, so they hire you and you work your Rolodex. You call your people and say, do you want to buy my little widget? Please, come on, buy my little widget, help me out here. So you guarded your contact list. You kept it almost secret. Last Monday, I was doing a day of consulting for Prudential Insurance in Hong Kong. And the people who are agents for the insurance company, they don't want Prudential to know their Rolodex, because they worry otherwise that if the insurance knows who they can call, that the insurance disintermediates them and directly makes those calls, and they don't make their money anymore. Now, that was the old world. The new world is that by refining the data, by creating information products, data products, LinkedIn creates value for the end user that they wouldn't get if they didn't share their contact list. Let me give you two examples. One, the example of sales. So let's say you join a company, you join a startup, and you want to make a sale into a big company, let's say into IBM. If you share your Rolodex, if you share your contact list, and so does everybody else in the company. Now, LinkedIn can figure out who is the best person who should make that call to the right person at IBM. It is by aggregating that information, having a certain purpose, sale, and then filtering it from that perspective, where everybody can be better off than if you all kept your information for yourselves. So let's say there is that guy at IBM, that executive, who is from Kaohsiung and went to the same high school your friend in your company went to. But if you didn't share your social graphs, you would not know to go to your friend and ask him to please give his high school friend at IBM a call. So that's an example of a sign flip, where something which used to be guarded, now you do better by opening it up. It is interesting to me that people still stick to some beliefs which are no longer the case. So we talked already about privacy. So if you think about Google Maps, if you want Google Map to tell you where you want to go at the next intersection, whether you want to go straight, whether you want to turn left, whether you want to turn right, you need to tell Google where you are. And you need to tell Google, where you want to go. Otherwise, no way can it tell you turn left at the next intersection. And it's very funny for me to see that politicians try to come up with arguments why, Google shouldn't be using that information. But my question for you is, do you think that there is more risk for you as students here at NTU, by you sharing all the information, let's say with Google? Or do you think there is more benefit for you? So, who thinks that upon reflection, maybe we should share less, because we don't get the value out of Google, out of Facebook, that we should be getting in exchange to the data we give? Who think, if you think about this, that you should be sharing less? Show of hands. All these things they could do, they could figure out, that you go buy beer at 3 o'clock at night at the local store. Who thinks that they should share less than they do actually? Who has no problem sharing what they do and feel that they get a good deal out of Google or Facebook? Yeah. So wherever I ask, it's always that almost nobody feels that they should be more careful. And most people think, I knowingly and willingly enter the deal of telling Facebook, for instance, what my birthday is. But it's interesting to me that in the media, you again and again see people who actually raise the red flag and say, it's so dangerous what you could do. I think it's a conversation we have to have in society about big data here. 3 examples before we take the little break. First one is future of insurance. So clearly, The point of insurance is, let's take health insurance, car. The point of insurance is to pool the risk. And I already was talking a bit about it when I talked about Max Levchin and him measuring where you walk to figure out at what conditions to give you a credit. So assume now that you knew everybody's DNA in the room. Assume you knew everybody's medical history. Assume even you knew how everybody is sleeping, how they're exercising, what they're eating. Assume that you could really make an amazingly good prediction on the health risks they have. Would you do that? Would you think that's something which you want to work for? To build an amazing model of knowing that if you eat that extra Xiaolong Bao today, your probability of having some heart problem in 20 years will be 10 to the minus 13 bigger than if you don't eat that Xiaolong Bao. Yeah, I think if it can change behavior, then great. If we can really give people that feedback, then I would probably end even one Xiaolong Bao even earlier than that. On the other hand, if we can't change behavior because it's our DNA, and we can't change our DNA, if you are not as fortunate as all of you are to be here at NTUEE, then maybe it's more tricky what we would want to do it. So in the United States, you are not allowed to use the zip code, to use the area where somebody lives in order to compute insurance. Why? Because the United States has some areas where primarily African American people live, other areas where primarily rich white people live, and so on. And if you use that information, it would be implicitly discriminating against certain races. And in the United States, the same people, the same country which came up, data of the people, your race, data by the people, where you live, how you move, but data for the people, they feel it's best to not allow insurance companies to use the zip code, to not figure out where somebody lives because it's a proxy for race. So when we talk about transparency, when you get an insurance policy, you have to write your name in. Now, I ask you, if somebody is called Wu or Liao or Weigend, does this tell you something about the race, maybe? So how do we want to deal with this? Because these insurances are personal. And what is it that we really want? If we say you cannot use the zip code in order to compute the premium, okay, I'm not using zip code, but maybe I can engineer the race by the name. 1 year ago, in the European Union, a directive was passed that said you cannot use the gender of a person in insurance. Wow. Everybody knows that the life table, life expectancy of women is different from that of men. So, how should we react to that? So the EU believes that we do more good for society by not looking at the data, by not taking the data into account that women live longer than men, in order to decrease discrimination. We are just looking here in this room. I mean, we are far away from having a 50-50 gender mix, and I think it's awesome to have as a chair a woman here in this room. But they made a law that you can't look at the gender of people. Now, whether somebody is called John has probably some relationship with his name. So would you want to then not use that information and have companies figure out that if a person called John applies, he is probably male? So these are all big questions which we have, and I don't have answers for you. And I told you already that undergrads, they answer questions. Grad students, they ask questions. Professors, they try to have other people learn how to ask questions. That's an example about insurance, where we need to figure out what do we really want, because we have all the data at the world. We know what your chances are, we know what your probabilities are, but how granular do you want to answer it? So I think rather than giving you more examples, let me summarize a bit what we talked about. So in the last 10, 20 years, we have had, last but not least, through Moore's law, an exponential increase in data. As you know, exponential functions are characterized by doubling times. The doubling time is about 1.5 years. That's pretty much the same as Moore's law, as the doubling time of transistors on a certain area. The price drops by a factor of 2 every 1.5 years. All of this is sort of the same underlying principle. So the data we create doubles every 1.5 years. What that actually means is that in one day now, we create more data than we had from the beginning of mankind to the year 2000. From the beginning of mankind to the year 2000, everything together is less than just in one day today. But it's not the amount of data which is the amazing thing. It is what we can do with it. And for me, it is that we can't hide behind, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the data. No, you do have it. The mindset is somewhere this data exists. But the question is, what do you, as the most amazing people here in Taiwan, at the best university, what do you actually want to build with those data? So, to make it concrete, you should have all gotten a piece of paper. And what I want you to do is, I want you to think about one piece of data about yourself, which you would not be comfortable if the rest of the people in the room knew about it. And write it down. So think about one thing which you would not be comfortable if the other students knew about it. I see many smiles here. Don't be shy. So write down one thing, or the category of one thing, anonymously. Don't write your name on it. We are able to know from the cameras here who wrote what. We do handwriting recognition. You don't have to write your name on it. We already know your name. But you can write it in Chinese, or you can write it in English, whatever is more comfortable. One thing, one secret, or better, one thing you're not comfortable with, if people in this room knew about it. Do you have something? If you didn't get a piece of paper, then just use another piece of paper. Difficult, huh? Does everybody have something? Who has not finished yet writing? Okay, we'll give you half more minute. And then on the other side, on the empty side, we want you to write down any questions you have. Quick questions, long questions, concerned what I talked about in the first hour. We then take a 10-minute break, because 2 hours is a long time if we have no break. We will quickly try to look at the questions you have, and then in the second hour, Professor Liao, Ofa, and I will have a conversation and try to bring in the questions you have. We wanted more of a dialogue than me just telling you how things are. So we care for your questions. We care for your secrets. So what I ask people to do is just put it to the center aisle here. What's the best way of collecting it from everybody? Because it's so crowded. We should take a break. Should we just say we have 2 people at the exits who collect as you take a break? Is that the easiest one? Yeah, okay. So take a break. We'll be back in 10 minutes, which is at 1:40. So quick bathroom, some fresh air. The 3 of us will have a discussion, and we need your input. So as you leave and get some breathing here, if somebody could wait at each door and just collect from everybody the piece of paper they have and just quickly pass it to us so we look through it, that would be great. I might not have been super clear. 10-minute break. It is now 1:30. We start again actually at 1:45, but think about it as a 10-minute break so you can get back in your seats. On your way out, while you're getting some fresh air, pass your piece of paper to who is collecting it. Who is collecting it at that corner? Can I have one person who is volunteering?
Is there an exit?
One person who's willing to volunteer.
I think there's only one door
There's only one door.
there. Yeah.
No door. There's another door there. Okay, so get out of the room, get some fresh air, and as you leave, are we ready? All right. I have a friend. His name is Brad Rubenstein. And Brad changed his birthday on Facebook. It was January 10, and he put it on January 11. Many friends said, "Happy birthday, Brad." And then he changed his birthday again. And said, "Happy birthday, Brad." And then changed his birthday again. And they said, "Happy birthday, Brad," which made him feel not all that special anymore. And then after doing it 5 times, a red box appeared on Facebook and said, "You can change your birthday once more, and then that's it." So luckily, Ofa today changed his birthday. So it says today is birthday. So I wanted to wish him happy birthday, Ofa. And here's a little present, and there's a key. It is locked. And just like data, companies that have data, it's for you.
I will try to hack it.
Yeah. The point we have here is that having access to the raw data, let's say the raw data Facebook has, is something which many people want, but I argue they have no idea what they really want. Because one, even if you had all the data you ever had in Facebook, it would be very difficult for you to actually understand what those data means. 2, very different, is even if we unlocked it, in order to actually understand the meaning, in many cases you need to compare yourself to others. So a bunch of you said, you would be worried if your bad eating habits would be recorded. So how do you know they are bad compared to your neighbor? And the third one is actually very interesting. Let's say you comment on somebody's Facebook. So on Saturday, people took a picture of us, and then people comment on that. So now if the person takes off that picture, and the heartfelt comments, now they sit in a vacuum that people don't know what they're referring to. I mean, what is the meaning of ownership of those data? But in your case, it's easier. You want to unlock what's in here.
Sure.
But maybe before we do that, we should sit down and go through some of the questions which you had prepared, and I should get my notes here, which you had prepared and which came in from the students now, because ultimately, my goal is for you to get your questions answered, to see what questions you have about the things I talked about at the beginning, and anything is fair game. You can truly ask me anything, and we have both Professor Liao and Ofa helping out if I'm not answering what you really want to know. So should we see whether there's some burning questions in some students' minds here, which you can just shout out before we look at the ones you were up? Yes? So just shout it out and we repeat it. Thank you. I saw that question. So, Google Glass, why am I wearing it? It is an experiment. It's a social experiment. And I have to confess, I've had it now for almost a year. So there's not that much novelty in it anymore. But it is interesting, like when we had dinner on Saturday, on the one hand, people don't object having surveillance cameras right in that cafe look at us. There was a camera right there looking at us. It's probably better quality than my camera in Google Glass. On the other hand, people actually were minding when I said, okay, Glass.
Investigate my mouth. My teeth.
So I think it's a social experiment. How we feel by being explicitly recorded. Remember what I said at the beginning when I said that online, people are okay with you sharing with Amazon what you want to buy, or you sharing with Google Maps where you are. Because in some way, it's pretty clear what it is that you're sharing. Why do you think in the offline world, you're more worried if, for instance, I were pointing a video camera at you for the next 5 minutes? You would probably get uncomfortable about it. Because you wouldn't know what it is that I'm doing with it. I'm looking at your micro expressions. A few of you said that they were falling asleep while I was talking. That was your secret. So maybe now I know when you're excited, when you fall asleep. So we don't know what is being recorded in that rich world. So the answer to your question is, for me, it's mainly a social experiment. And it's mainly recording. Yes, I could get stuff played into it, but here's a secret. It's usually out of battery. Like right now. Thank you. There's a question from the German guy.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I wanted to ask, do you have any recommendation for the citizens of a nation who lives very close to another nation, is very big, and has an authoritarian regime, and is afraid that this authoritarian regime can use data and the flow of data to control or impact its own citizens?
So when Google left China, I thought Google claiming, you know, Chinese are hacking and that's why they're getting out. I mean, the Chinese are hacking all the time. So there couldn't be anything new about it. At that stage, I actually thought it was more that Baidu was actually innovating in some fronts, particularly in the social fronts, where Google hadn't thought about innovating. And so my gut reaction was, don't pretend, you know, that you're leaving for political reasons when you actually are leaving because you do want to say, you know, that somebody else is good. I think I've changed my mind on this one by now. I don't know. You know much more.
Yes.
So maybe you should answer the question about the hackers from mainland.
Okay. As you know, when you pay less in money, you pay more in privacy. Some incidents like Xiaomi cell phone and Huawei routers. Yeah, there's and recently recent sell the circuit that has a vector that's directly send your data to, as I know, part of the army in China. They have a huge group of information war that they have made a lot of attack, like the pop vote in Hong Kong in the start of this year, and then you know Taiwan has some sort of movement, and so China government began to collect some data about the opinion of people.
The opinion.
Of people, not only the politicians, but people. There's a case that's someone made a line message that's sent to a lot of people and ask you if you support
KMT.
yeah, some investigating your political potential, and some even ask your opinion about like some kind of movement, and they give you a link, and you will fill out a form. But the shortened link is coded with your cell phone number, so it seems to be anonymous, but actually it's not. So they know who you are, and what's your opinion.
Who are you?
Over. Yeah. And I will not suicide today.
So is it your cell phone number, or is it your cell phone, actually a physical cell phone, or is it maybe if you have an Android phone, your Google, I mean I use my Gmail account on my Android phone. Even when you say they know who you are because they know your cell phone.
Actually, they can know more about your personal information from ISP. You know, when you register a phone number, you give those ISPs your like your ID, your birthday, your parents, or even salary.
So since the question came from a German guy, there was somebody called Herr Kirchner, a German guy who had some interesting business model. And his business model was he was selling condos that didn't exist. So he was asking for down payment, and you know, because that's how it works, you put down down payment, and then he left the country. So he went to Canada, and only a couple of days after he had landed and made his home there, the Interpol, the police, basically said, Herr Kirch, happy to meet you here. I think something's not quite all right in how you do business. And he was wondering, how did they find him? Because he, of course, left his German mobile phone in Germany. He, of course, got himself a new SIM card and a new phone in Canada. Of course, he didn't use his original passport. How did they find him? Well, he still used to call the same people. So he still had a few friends. And one node dropped out of the network, no more calling behavior. Another node dropped into the network, somebody making similar phone calls. And that originates in Canada, a little bit of cell phone triangulation and knock knock. So that is, an example that maybe it's not that you give them your birthday. Is it really today?
I don't know.
You know, I don't know either. Or your name or your parents, but maybe it really is the calls you make. Yeah. So we should bring Professor Liao in as well. So let's move back a bit. So if you have questions or if you want to moderate something, if you saw something interesting here from what the students had, if you have other questions, we have half an hour and the time really is all yours. So we want you to have a good experience. Because if you have a good experience, Professor Liao is happy and then I'm happy and Andrew Ho is happy.
Do you have any questions, any opinion about the data or anything you want to know a little bit more in details about the data we found?
Are you afraid of sharing all your data on your website?
So the question is whether I'm afraid of sharing all my data on my website. So I used to use Google Latitude, which allowed you to have real-time geolocation with a piece of JavaScript appear on your website, including a map. And people used that. For instance, I remember meeting with a student. I said, I'll be there in 5 minutes. They said, no, I know where you are right now. You'll be here in 15 minutes. So it creates more transparency. So you can't lie as easily. It also creates opportunities for other people saying, oh, well, Andreas, I see that you will be in Taipei. Do you have time to meet? I'll be in Taipei as well. Then the standard argument, which always comes is, well, aren't you afraid that somebody is breaking into your house in San Francisco if they know you are in Taipei? And all I can say is, if somebody really wants to break into my house, I'd rather have them break into my house when I'm not there. Because it is, too much trouble if you actually are there. So the data which I share on Weigend.com is nothing compared to what you guys have as data you wouldn't share. And when I looked at those, it was very interesting that a good number of people said they would not share who they like. And a good number of people said they would not share who they dislike. It's quite interesting.
I saw more grades and they just sleep. I saw from my pile of paper.
Yeah.
Many of people said about grades, and they take a nap just now.
Just to take a nap, yeah. Another couple of quick questions, and we have a whole pool of questions lying around us. But sometimes it's better to sort of, get it interactive if you have a question. Yes? All right.
How to deal with fake data? Like we also have some fake behavior in our daily life. Like we went to the coffee shop and coding some simple question and to let other people think we are fancy, smart, like computer engineer guys. And so how to deal with the fake data? And since the data come to build who we are, so can the fake data to affect how we actually are?
Mm-hmm.
That's my question.
So I interpret this in two ways. And it reminds me 10 years ago, when I was working with Alibaba in a workshop, we talked about data, and one person said, oh, I don't know about those data. And there was one guy walking by the door at that moment who turned out to be Joe Tsai, Taiwanese, who is the CFO of Alibaba. And Joe just happened to hear that sentence, stopped by and said, What do you mean you don't know? Do you mean you don't know whether we have that data at all? You don't know whether the data is correct? You don't know how to interpret the number. So the sensor gives you the right data, but you don't know what it means. So sometimes, having bad data in the sense of maybe incorrect needs to be drilled down of understanding what do we actually mean. Is it missing? The Thai baht crisis in 1997, people did not see at the CIA because they weren't looking at data that stopped coming in. The Thai government in 1997 was not reporting things anymore. They were not reporting wrong data. They were just not reporting. But the triggers were not set about noticing absence of data or missing data or bad data. The other meaning, how you could interpret bad data, is about behavior which, you eat your late night snack and you shouldn't be eating it. Or you just, so that's another meaning of bad data. Or maybe you have yet another one which I didn't get.
I don't mean the wrong data. I mean maybe you to make to beautify your photo on Facebook. It's kind of fake data.
Fake.
You intentionally to make some data and it's not good. You actually are. And that's my question.
So yes, I was on the board of a dating site, and I've actually worked with a number of dating sites. That's the mainland China people now, right? One of them was by her, actually, in Beijing, and it was very interesting how people, change things over time, let's put it this way. So, in your example of faking things, of bad data, let us assume that all the history of what you had said before at Facebook or at LinkedIn or on a dating site, that all the history of what you had put in would be visible. So today, you say you are 180 centimeters. Yesterday, you were 178. Last week, we were only 176. So you are thinking that by being taller, your chances on that dating site will go up. So by having the entire history of what you provided, that I think is one way, creating that transparency in the data, giving people tools to refine the data is one way to create more honesty. On LinkedIn, I distinctly remember that I had an intern at a startup who then, the startup died, 10 years later made himself the CTO of that startup. He gave himself a promotion after the fact. So transparency, I think, in many cases can make the ecosystem better. Let's take shop assistants. I gave you the example of them having cameras and observing you. But what about if you go into your favorite supermarket here, and the shop assistant has a sign, just like OFAS. And if you read it, it actually tells me how many sales he made today. It is small letters. It tells me how much he slept last night. And all those things, would you, or it even has the rating, the net promoter score of people saying, yes, he is a very good sales assistant. So how would you feel about having that transparency into the sales assistant here?
Can you say, okay.
Yeah, so let's say for simplicity, not using dating site, but use this dating site. So OFA, when you go on his dating site profile, it says how many girls did he hit up tonight. So he only wrote to one girl. That's very different from he wrote to 50 girls. Then it also says, integrated over the last month, what is the probability of them writing back? And it turns out it's only 0.1%, versus it's 99%. And then what's the average ping pong length. So he says ping, she says pong, he says ping, pong. How many ping pongs are there? How many exchanges? So you could surface all those data about him. Would that make the ecosystem more clean?
But there must be a degree of the transparency, right? So some it's not the information you to share everybody, and this information is only a secret to yourself. It must some information you can share to a certain group of people, and so I think the degree of the transparency can deal with this question.
Let me ask you, who of you has posted something on Facebook in the last week? Who of you has not posted to Facebook in the last week? Okay, it's about half-half. Who of you who have posted to Facebook in the last week actually thought about the audience? In other words, explicitly changed the setting of who should be able to see the post? Just want to get a feeling. Who of you actually has changed the default setting? Who of you who has posted in the last week? Very few. So maybe about a quarter at most, a quarter of those who posted actually think about the privacy settings. So it's often, I think, too much work to have to think about. I mean, I never change them. I always have them as public, to think about who you want to see.
So this question of is just too late to change before sleep and fun, but you actually it's too you act in your heart you want to just to share to certain people, but in the Facebook sleeping is too much work to do that. So I think it's a problem.
Yeah, Professor Liao.
Yeah, I think for Amazon they have a recommendation for buy these people and these people also buy something. And if we combine with Facebook, like your friend also buys something, and it's Christmas coming. If I buy something and my friend, it's also possible use this function to guess what he will get in the next coming Christmas for the present. I think this makes the presents not so surprising. So I think it still have some function. We can control the privacy of what we buy, maybe just for the Amazon itself, but not be used as a recommendation or something. I think this still have some control. Or maybe you share your geolocations, but you maybe you cannot get some surprising early bags with your wife, with your friend, with some buy something special for that. So I think it's still need to some control of it for this purpose or something like this. What's your opinion? Thank you.
My opinion is that our notion of trust, who we trust, is changing big time. Would you trust a friend if they don't share with you their Facebook, if they block you?
I want to give some comment.
Yes.
I think everyone in this room is special people. Not you. We know there's a case in Taipei mayor's election. Okay. I just talked to Weigend about the election. There's we said 1G. The term is say to one of the candidates, he buy, he pay a company, and the company buy a lot of accounts on BDD. I just told you 2 days ago. And they try to post some messages to the people on BDD to try to affect them, their opinions on some instance or some media to affect people on their opinion. So, but finally, crowd intelligence help out because we can trace the history, the MAC address, the IP address, and also the life of the accounts and the social graph between these accounts. So, although they make some data in a very short period, but you can trace the history. Electronic record tells the truth.
You can't fake the graph easily. It's very difficult to fake the second order properties. I mean, you can of course create, an account, a fake account. And I actually have to confess, I was looking for something and wanted to understand how do people who I'm not friends with see my Facebook account. So I created a fake Facebook account. I created a second Facebook account. And I was worried that the secret police would show up and knock at the door, because that was really something which I thought I would never do. Who of you has a second Facebook account? Wow. Okay. So I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Okay.
Can I read? Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hi, this is Rico. I actually teach here. So
Great.
I would like to, thank you, this is a nice talk. And I would like to hear your comments about knowledge. Because as you might know that people interpret data with their own knowledge or common sense. So we get much more information out of the data. So if, let's say, machine can collect so many data, but how can we equip the machine with knowledge so that the machine can really interpret the data to the same level as human does? So I want to know what do you see about the trend of the future of knowledge?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So at Amazon, we had a very pragmatic attitude that was very much focusing on the actions you can take. So if you have a box, a black box, let's say like a neural network, and it just predicts what's going to happen next based on a set of inputs, versus you have something which has knowledge, but it's not as good. You can explain it, but it doesn't predict as well. How much better does the black box need to do, where you don't make the knowledge explicit over the explicit system? I don't know if the answer, but there's some trade-off. So at Amazon, pretty much everything was starting with the action. You can make, the button green, or you make button red. And then we carefully constructed the evaluation of the user actions. That was a lot of work. Jeff Bezos and I spent 50 hours really thinking about those equations with the different teams. For example, for recommendations, should you give, positive weight if the algorithm predicts the probability correct? So if you say the probability is 10% and you have 100 observations and actually 10 of them, it happens. Or should you say, well, we only care for the top prediction and we don't care for the probability of the other ones? So I think the main work is not so much in getting to knowledge, but the main work is writing down the equations, how we want to evaluate things. What, for example, is the time horizon? Should I make a quick buck of somebody by screwing them now? They will never come again, but at least I got that quick buck. Or do I say, I care for long-term relationships, and I'm more than happy to invest right now to share things. I don't expect anything back right now because I know in the long term having a customer or in the long term having a friend is what's more important for me. So those are judgment calls. How do things decay over time? That's, I think, more where the creativity goes in than into knowledge. So this all said, I think we have many examples, including what NTUEE is best for, namely medicine. Many examples where computers make better decisions than doctors. And Danny Kahneman, a friend of mine in New York, who I just saw 2 weeks ago for dinner. Danny, he's very curious whether people live in that illusion that they make better decisions, where in many cases computers, given that we now live in a data-rich world where we have all this data about products, about our behavior, that now maybe in many cases computers could make better decisions if we actually agree on what it means to be better. So I think the thinking has to be in how do we trade off in medicine quality of life versus quantity of life. We now have the data. We know if we perform a certain operation, what is the probabilities in terms of quality, in terms of quantity. But now we need to make the decisions, as opposed to before saying, oh, we don't know. The typical McKinsey interview question is, well, how much is a life worth? Oh, infinite. Okay, what does this mean on air travel? That means you should ground all planes, because the probability is not zero that the plane will have an accident. So if you really believe that there's an infinite constraint, then all airplanes are grounded, and I'll be in Taipei forever.
About Murphy's law. Hi, I would like to know when you advise companies who want to embrace big data, and which one comes more frankly is that the company gives you a goal which they want to learn or how they want to use the big data, then they collect all the data, or otherwise they collect the data first and find out what they can do with that data.
Mm-hmm. So I have a few rules for big data. And one of those rules is to start with a question, not with the data. So in the first hour, where I gave you all these examples, which I think are exciting because they're basically all questions. You now have all this data, but what are the questions you try to answer? So that is one piece of advice in response to your question. Don't say, gee, I need to clean the data first. Because as data is growing exponentially, your time of cleaning data is going to grow exponentially. But since your time is finite, you'll soon hit the point where your time and the exponential growth, cross, and then at that stage, you won't get anything done anymore. Analysis paralysis. But think about what actions you can take. What decisions you need to make? And then you think about the data.
Thank you, Dr. Weigend. After you're sharing your speech with us, to be honest, I'm very worried about my future as a WE student in the era of the big data.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the reasons. Because from many of the examples you share with us, it's about to model the behavior of human, right? So if you only care about the techniques to analyze the data, I think that's not the most difficult parts, because there are many the present existing techniques, like the libraries you can access.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm thinking that we have equal chances to access all the data. It's open source, so we can it's equal chances. So what really differentiates the result is the way we approach these data. So I'm really thinking in this way, that a student who majors in psychology may do better than our EE major student, because we can learn to apply the tools very quickly, right? So I want to know, what is the value of being a EE student in this new era of the big data? Yeah. Good point. Yeah, thank you.
So I started off as EE in Germany before switching to physics. And when I did my PhD, my advisor was Dave Rummelhart, who actually was a cognitive psychologist who invented neural networks. So I have been very fluid between fields. And for me, I mean, the way, without wanting to insult anybody, for me, I just asked the one question at the dinner, which was, well, would you rather hire a EE undergrad who then learned psychology, or would you hire a psychology undergrad who then learned EE?
Don't worry about it.
So that's why I'm very, very happy to be here in the EE department, honestly. I think, you know, when we talk about the skills, so at Stanford, you know, we have good computer science and we have good EE. The difference is, and my brother, he also has a PhD in physics and works in a research center in Germany. He has a saying about computer science students. He says when he gets computer science students and they talk about algorithms, they say, oh, it already converges in the last digits, versus EEs, physicists, they have a good feeling about what I call data literacy. We know orders of magnitude. We know how ultimately things work. We have a good mental model. And many computer scientists actually don't have that. So I'm actually very happy to be a data person who often doesn't know the details of the algorithm, but who knows which way it has to go. And then, because there are enough people who know the details, who we can ask, but not enough people who actually help us build things and help us guide in the right direction.
Excuse me, can I ask one more question?
Yes, sure.
If you are now giving a lecture to a EE class, and talking about, it's our first lesson about the big data, and what kind of the skill do you think is the most important to teach the students? They must equip. Yeah. Already.
Yeah. So that is what Professor Liao wanted me to actually land with what is the skills that it takes to become a successful data scientist. What makes a data scientist a good data scientist? And for that, I think the most important is to be curious. So you have to be curious about the world. You have to think about a data scientist like a data detective. So I think that's number one. And I think we often are just lucky. So my dad was a physics and math teacher, so he just, I inherited that being curious about the world in a mathematical sense. Two, you have to be willing to deal with whatever comes in terms of data. So that's very much a EE attitude, that this was coming in, so that's what we have. As opposed to a mathematician, I'm way not smart enough to be a mathematician, who lives in an idealized world. Yes. We live in the real world. Yeah. So that means the ability to handle data. Then a third skill, which I think people underestimate and they often cast people wrong, is it is a collaborative effort. So Jeff Bezos once told me that if he was let alone in a room, he would turn into a vegetable. So that trying to figure out things together. And also the former chief scientist of Sun, Bill Joy, he has that saying, most smart people don't work here. Meaning, play with others. So just the collaboration aspect is very important. Another one is that you have to just the mindset of telling stories. It's not enough to say, here's the answer, 73. But it's always about interpretation, about the story behind it. So that's what I would say, being curious, having the skills or acquiring the skills and the mindset of just being able and willing to deal with large data, whatever there is, as opposed to having somebody else please clean the data for me. That's not going to happen. Then the willingness to collaborate, which I personally think is super important. And then the last one is the storytelling, which goes back to the questions, which I talked about earlier. That, of course, assumes having an audience like you guys are very smart people who, when needed, can just learn anything. And I just loved that in the dinner we had on Saturday evening, that it was just so much a NTUEE attitude that we thought about, should we have it videotaped? NTUEE, as opposed to, at Stanford, this would be illegal. Because I didn't get everybody's permission here in writing to it. It's just do it. At Amazon, there was one saying, and maybe I should close with that saying. It was, don't ask for permission. Ask for forgiveness.
I love it.
So it is a wonderful group. Again, thank you, Lao, for inviting me. I very much appreciate that. I have time. I have no agenda for the rest of the day. So if people want to talk more, if you want to have any other questions, I'm super happy to make the schedule right after we are done here. And but let's end with a round of applause for you, your questions, your secrets, and for OFA, and most importantly, for Professor Liao for making this possible. Thank you.
Dr. Andreas, several rounds of applause again.
No.
So if you want to continue this chat, perhaps we can just go to EE 108.
Okay? Great.
Okay.
So EE 108, that's actually much better than doing it here. EE 108, whoever wants to get on the agenda for the rest of the day, EE 108, and then we make the plan.
Okay.
Have a good day.
So we'll end the day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we take all these secrets. You take your cake.